They thought fear would make me disappear. But standing inches from a gun on my own driveway, I realized the next choice this man made would expose a lie powerful people never wanted uncovered. The metal was so close I could see my reflection twisted in the slide. The metal was so close to my face I could see myself bent and twisted in the slide. His arm was locked, hands steady, too steady, like someone who'd done this before and liked the control. "You're trespassing," he said flatly. "Pack up and go." I didn't flinch. Behind him sat my house, paid off. No mortgage, no liens, no HOA signs anywhere near it. Just my land, my driveway, and the silence I'd earned with decades of work. Before we go any further, drop a comment and tell me what country you're watching from. I want to see how far this story reaches. Because to understand why a woman running a local HOA campaign would send an armed imposter to threaten me off land I legally owned, you need the backstory. My name is Ethan Walker. I'm a Marine. I don't advertise it. No hats, no stickers. I served my time, did my tours, and came home wanting the one thing Marines rarely get: peace. This house was supposed to be that. The problem started when Karen Brown decided she wanted power. She was campaigning for HOA president in a nearby gated community. Flyers everywhere, yard signs, packed meetings, big promises, bigger smiles. One issue, though, I didn't live in that HOA. My property sat just outside their boundary, always had. But Karen decided boundaries were flexible when they got in the way. One afternoon, she knocked on my door with a clipboard and a smile that felt rehearsed. She told me my land was technically included, that I owed dues, that during campaign season my driveway would be used for out-of-state volunteers helping her run. I said no, calmly, respectfully. I showed her my deed, the survey, county records. She didn't even glance at them. She smiled and said, "We'll handle this." 2 weeks later, the letters started coming. Violation notices, unauthorized occupancy, pending removal, unsigned, fake, threatening. I ignored them. Then he showed up. Black vest, cheap radio, a fake badge clipped to his chest that read HOA cop, like that meant anything. He walked up my driveway like he owned it, hand already hovering near his waistband. 30 minutes, he said. Vacate the property. I laughed once. That's when he pulled the gun. Last warning, he said. Karen doesn't like being told no. Time slowed. I noticed his stance was wrong. Grip sloppy. Breathing too fast. This wasn't law enforcement. This was intimidation pretending to be authority. "You're making a serious mistake," I told him. "You're armed, you're trespassing, and you're threatening a homeowner." He sneered. "You don't get it. She wants you gone." And suddenly, the real plan snapped into focus. They weren't trying to negotiate. They weren't trying to verify ownership. They were trying to scare me into leaving, so no one would question why campaign vans and strangers suddenly needed my land. Standing there, staring down the barrel of a gun on my own driveway, I realized something else too. Karen had no idea who she'd sent him after, and he had no idea who he'd just drawn on. Because when I spoke again, he kept the gun raised. And that next moment was about to change everything. What happened next would turn a fake threat into a real crime and leave no one pretending this was just HOA business anymore. He didn't blink, didn't waver. Instead, he leaned in, slow, deliberate, like closeness would finish what the threat hadn't. 30 minutes, he repeated. "Remove me how?" I asked calmly. That question hit him harder than yelling ever could. People who borrow authority hate being asked to explain it. He swallowed, adjusted his grip, and the muzzle twitched, just a fraction, enough for me to clock it, enough to confirm what I already knew. "You're resisting a lawful order," he snapped. "Last chance." I exhaled through my nose. "You are not law enforcement," I said evenly. "You're on private property with a firearm, threatening a homeowner. That's felony territory." His jaw tightened. Behind him, a black SUV idled at the curb. No front plates, windows tinted too dark, and through the glass, campaign flyers stacked on the seat, Karen's smiling face staring back at me like a bad joke. So this was the plan. Use my land as a staging area, park volunteers, store equipment, control access. And if I didn't cooperate, intimidate, escalate, push until I folded. He stepped closer. The barrel brushed my cheek. That's when I moved. I shifted my weight, turned my shoulder, and slapped the slide sideways with the heel of my hand, hard. The gun went offline just as his finger tightened. The shot cracked past my ear, tearing into something behind me. Before his brain caught up, I was already inside his reach. My forearm slammed into his throat, crushing the air and the words right out of him. His grip loosened. I ripped the gun free and kicked his knee sideways. It folded with a sharp pop. He went down screaming. I stepped back, weapon trained on him now. "Hands on the ground," I ordered. "Do not move." He reached for his waistband. That was the second mistake. One clean strike, controlled. Enough to end the fight without ending his life. He went limp, face first on my driveway. Silence rushed in. My heart stayed steady, breathing even. Training doesn't vanish just because the setting looks suburban. Neighbors poured outside, phones up, mouths open. Someone yelled they'd called the police. Another shouted my name like we were lifelong friends. I set the gun down carefully, kicked it away, stepped back with my hands visible. The man groaned. Blood trickled from his nose, one eye swelling shut. Behind us, the SUV revved. Then, it was gone. Karen wasn't sticking around. I looked down at him. The fake vest, the badge, the confidence shattered on concrete. Sirens wailed in the distance, and as they grew louder, one truth became impossible to ignore. This wasn't a campaign dispute anymore. This was armed impersonation, attempted forced eviction, and ambition collapsing under the weight of its own lies. And when the police arrived, they were going to want names. If this HOA story has you hooked, hit like and subscribe, because what happened after the police stepped out of those cars changed everything. The first cruiser came in fast, tires crunching at the edge of my driveway. Then another. Red and blue lights washed over my house, cutting through the afternoon calm like a knife. And that's when the real questions began. What the officers realized in the next few minutes would flip this entire story from a neighborhood dispute into something far darker, with consequences no campaign could outrun. I stayed exactly where I was, hands open, palms out, still. The first officer stepped out of his cruiser with his hand resting near his holster. His eyes moved from me, to the man on the ground, to the black vest that read HOA Cop. "What happened here?" he asked. "I was threatened at gunpoint on my own property," I said evenly. "I defended myself. The firearm is on the ground. It's unloaded." I nodded toward the man on the driveway. "That man is not law enforcement." Another officer moved in immediately, kicked the weapon farther away, dropped to one knee and cuffed him. A third checked his pulse and radioed for EMS. The fake cop tried to speak. It came out as a wet groan, half-formed excuses. No one listened. The first officer turned back to me. "Sir, I need your ID." I reached into my pocket slowly and handed it over. He looked at the name, then the address, then the house behind me. "This is your property?" "Yes." "No HOA?" "None. Never has been." He handed my ID to another officer, who walked it back to the cruiser to run it. Behind us, neighbors edged closer, phones still up, whispers turning into statements. The first officer lowered his voice. "You military?" "Yes." He nodded once. Not impressed, not intimidated, just understanding the posture, the calm, the fact that I hadn't moved an inch since they arrived. EMS rolled in moments later. As they lifted the fake cop onto a stretcher, one of the medics shook his head. Fractured orbital, crushed knee, concussion. Then he paused. Lucky to be breathing. Lucky. The word just hung there. An officer approached me again, notebook open. "Sir, we'll need a full statement."
"You'll get it," I said, "along with my deed, the survey, and the notices that started all this." That got his attention. I watched as another officer opened a pouch on the vest lying on the stretcher. Out came a cheap badge, a prepaid phone, and a folded sheet of paper. Campaign instructions, names, addresses. Karen Brown's name appeared more than once. The officer's jaw tightened. Down the street, a neighbor shouted they'd found more flyers dumped behind a fence. Someone else mentioned late-night meetings, vans, cash exchanges. The picture wasn't forming anymore. It was complete. By the time the stretcher doors closed, the officers weren't asking if a crime had been committed. They were asking how many. Before leaving, one officer pulled me aside. "Mr. Walker," he said, "you're not under arrest. This appears to be clear self-defense against an armed impersonator. We'll be in touch." I nodded. As the cruisers pulled away, the neighborhood finally exhaled. Phones lowered. Whispers faded. People drifted back inside, carrying a story they'd tell for years. I stood alone on my driveway, my house still behind me. Karen wanted land. She wanted power. She wanted obedience.
What she got instead was an investigation, a trail of evidence, and a man she sent to do her dirty work facing charges that don't disappear when campaign signs come down. That's how a woman who thought boundaries were flexible learned something permanent. You don't threaten a Marine on his own property, not with a lie, not with a fake badge, and not with a gun you have no right to carry. Because when the truth shows up, with sirens and paperwork, it doesn't negotiate. Subscribe to witness what happens when quiet homeowners refuse to be pushed into silence. Then like the video if the truth arriving with paperwork felt heavier than the gun ever did. And tell me in the comments, was this a man defending his ground or the moment power finally overreached?